we've been able to determine using radiocarbon dating of tooth enamel that Naia died between 12,000 and 13,000 years ago.
For centuries, scientists have been searching for the answer to one big question. How did humans first reach the American continent, so far from the rest of the world? Many theories have been proposed, but none have given a complete answer. Some say humans crossed a land bridge from Asia, while others think they traveled by sea, following coastlines that are now lost beneath the ocean. For years, these theories remained unproven, until now. Recently, scientists began exploring the deep caves hidden beneath the waters of Mexico, and that's where they started to find the missing pieces of the puzzle. But what exactly did they find? And how is it changing what we know about human history? Let's dive in. The underground world. On the coast of Mexico, where the Caribbean Sea meets the thick green jungle, lies the ancient town of Tulum. Once a powerful Maya port city, it was a center of trade, ritual, and life more than 800 years ago. Today, tourists visit for the turquoise water and wild jungle adventures, but few know what lies beneath their feet. Because under this tropical paradise hides an entire world frozen in time. If you could somehow drain the bright turquoise waters off Mexico's Caribbean coast and walk beneath the jungle near Tulum, you'd find a hidden world few people ever see. Beneath the surface stretches a vast network of limestone tunnels filled with dark, still water. These flooded caves, known as cenotes, connect to underground rivers that flow silently beneath the land. To divers, these caves are beautiful and full of mystery. But to archaeologists, they're much more. They're like time capsules. Inside, they've found bones of Ice Age animals, ancient tools, and even human skeletons. Clues to a forgotten world. But how did all this end up down here? Thousands of years ago, during the Ice Age, these caves were dried out because the sea level was more than 100 meters lower. People walked through them, and animals roamed and hunted in the area. It was a place full of life. Then, as the planet warmed and the glaciers melted, sea levels rose, drowning the tunnels and trapping everything inside. Perfectly preserved for thousands of years. But how could these structures remain intact after thousands of years? The secret lies in the environment itself. Deep below the surface, sunlight never touches these tunnels. Stalactites hang from the ceiling like rows of sharp teeth, and the air feels thick and still. But do you know what's even crazier? The water here is so calm that it perfectly reflects the rocks above, making it almost impossible to tell which way is up or down. One wrong move, and you could lose all sense of direction in this silent, endless maze beneath the earth. Over time, these flooded tunnels evolved into natural vaults, preserving perfectly the traces of the past. Inside, archaeologists have found the skeletons of ancient people, bits of charcoal from fires, and even handprints pressed into clay thousands of years ago. In this quiet place, the bones have stayed almost perfectly preserved, when anywhere else they would have turned to dust. But even though the cenotes have protected these remains so beautifully, one thing rarely survives here: DNA. The warm, salty water destroys it long before scientists can recover any traces. For years, researchers could only study the bones' shapes and sizes, never their genetics. Normally, scientists date remains using collagen in bones with radiocarbon methods. But here, the collagen was gone. So they turned to a different trick: uranium-thorium dating. Over thousands of years, a thin layer of calcite forms on the surface of the bones, which protects them from the marine environment. By measuring the ratio of uranium to thorium within that layer, scientists can determine how long it has been growing. This method allows them to estimate the exact age of the fossils hidden beneath. When researchers applied this technique to the remains, the results were astonishing. Some of the bones buried deep within the caves were nearly 10,000 years old, and some were even older than that. Scientists always knew these remains were ancient, but they never imagined they had been lying in darkness for so long. For centuries, they have been hiding secrets from a time when giant animals roamed the earth, and the first humans were beginning to explore the land. But who were these people? That question led to one of the most haunting discoveries ever made under Tulum: the discovery of Chanhole 3. In 2016, a group of divers exploring one of Tulum's flooded caves entered a place locals call Chanhole, meaning little hole. As they moved their lights through the dark water, they noticed a pale shape under a layer of sand. At first, they thought it was just a rock, but upon taking a closer look, they realized it was a human skull. Around it were more bones, teeth, parts of hands and legs, all covered in a thin, shiny layer of minerals that sparkled in the light. Scientists later named her Chanhole 3 because she was the third skeleton found in that cave system. Unlike most remains found there, this one was almost completely intact, revealing remarkable details about her age, appearance, and even how she might have lived and died thousands of years ago. Scientists took the skeleton to the lab and studied every tiny detail, like detectives trying to piece together a forgotten life. Her teeth showed cavities, likely from eating fruit and starchy foods. On her skull, there were 3 healed scars, signs that she had been hurt but survived. Whether those scars came from accidents, violence, or some old ritual, the truth remains unknown. Scientists also found traces of infection in her remains, a reminder that survival back then meant enduring sickness and injury without any help. She had lived a hard life, yet managed to reach her 30s, a rare feat for someone of her time. Then scientists decided to date her remains to understand just how old she really was, but they faced a huge problem. There was no collagen left in her bones to help determine her age, so scientists turned to a different method, a new way of dating the remains. They measured uranium and thorium isotopes in the thin calcite layer coating her bones. Those measurements revealed she was at least 9,900 years old and lived near the end of the Ice Age, when giant sloths and saber-toothed cats still roamed parts of Mexico. Scientists knew the remains were ancient, but they never imagined they had been sitting in darkness for this long. But that wasn't the only thing that surprised the scientists. The real shock came when they took a closer look at her skull. When researchers compared her skull to other ancient remains found across Mexico, they noticed something strange. Skulls found in the Yucatan Peninsula, like hers, were usually rounder with lower foreheads, while those from central Mexico tended to be longer and narrower. But Chanhole 3 didn't fit neatly into either group. She was different, and no one knew why. So who was she? Did 2 different populations live in Mexico at the same time? Were they separate migrations? Or did one group evolve differently as they spread across the land? Scientists had no answer, as Chanhole 3's DNA had been destroyed by centuries of salt water. With her bones, scientists could determine her age, but without her genetic makeup, they couldn't say anything about her ancestry. She sat at the crossroads of 2 possibilities. Either Mexico once held 2 unrelated human lineages, or one adaptable group that evolved regionally within a few thousand years. For years, Chanhole 3 remained a mystery, proof that ancient people lived here, but also a reminder of how much we still didn't understand. And then, not far away, another cave would finally give the answers everyone was looking for. Naia, the girl in the pit. In 2007, a group of cave divers began exploring a deep chamber in Tulum's cave system known as the Hoyo Negro. About 100 feet below the surface, the chamber opened into a huge, dark space shaped like a bell. As the divers moved through the water, mapping the tunnels, they spotted something strange. When they got closer, they saw a skull lying beside the bones of extinct Ice Age animals. The skeleton belonged to a young girl. Over time, the divers carefully uncovered almost her entire skeleton. They named her Naia. She was around 15 or 16 years old when she died, likely falling into the pit when it was still dry, maybe while searching for water. The fall killed her instantly. When the sea rose, her body was sealed in the flooded cave for thousands of years. This discovery was like gold for archaeologists because they had never found such a complete human skeleton from this period in the Americas. When they dated the remains of Naia using uranium-thorium isotopes and radiocarbon tests on nearby animal bones, they found that she was between 12,000 and 13,000 years old. But it was her skull that puzzled everyone. Like Chanhole 3's, Nina's skull didn't match modern Native Americans. It was narrow, with distinctive proportions often described as Paleo-American. Some scientists had argued that this shape meant the earliest Americans came from an entirely different ancestral stock that was later replaced. However, this was only a theory, which couldn't be confirmed without DNA. So the scientists began searching for DNA, and, against all odds, they found it in Naia's skeleton. Luckily, one of Naia's teeth had preserved fragments of mitochondrial DNA. Scientists extracted it carefully, knowing that even the smallest contamination could destroy their work. When they sequenced her DNA, they were surprised by the results. Naia's DNA belonged to haplogroup D1, a lineage that traces back to Beringia, the land bridge that once connected Siberia and Alaska during the Ice Age. Now it is the same maternal line found widely among Native American populations today. In other words, this girl who died in a Mexican cave 13,000 years ago shared deep ancestry with the living descendants of the first Americans. That one discovery connected two worlds that once seemed completely different: the ancient skull shapes of early Americans and the DNA of modern indigenous people. Naia proved that these differences in appearance didn't mean separate origins. They were part of the same story. She became the missing link that proved continuity through time. But just as her discovery brought clarity, another cave in Mexico would soon bring a shocking new twist. Chiquihuite Cave. In the mountains of Zacatecas, 9,000 feet above sea level, lies a dry cave called Chiquihuite Cave. In 2010, archaeologists began excavating the site. They expected to find the usual things: tools, bones, and signs of Ice Age hunters from around 12,000 years ago. Instead, what they found shook the scientific world. Deep inside the cave, they discovered thousands of tiny stone pieces, sharp flakes, points, and tools that clearly had been shaped by human hands. When scientists tested the soil using radiocarbon dating, they found that some layers were 26,000 to 30,000 years old. If true, that meant humans were already in Mexico in the middle of the Ice Age, long before most scientists believed it was even possible to cross the Bering Land Bridge. The discovery caused an uproar. Many scientists didn't believe it. They argued the stones could have formed naturally. Since no human bones or DNA were found, they said the evidence wasn't strong enough. Others disagreed. They pointed out that the soil layers were consistent and that traces of animal DNA showed organic material could survive in the cave for thousands of years. To them, Chiquihuite Cave was a rare window into a much older human past, one that went far beyond what we thought possible. The debate still isn't settled, but one thing is clear. This cave pushed humanity's timeline in the Americas much further back than anyone imagined. But was this really proof of a lost early population, or just a coincidence of nature? If the findings are true, it means humans reached Mexico long before the Ice Age ended, maybe by sea routes or paths we haven't yet discovered. And if not, it reminds us that extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof. Either way, Chiquihuite Cave added a new layer to the mystery that began in Tulum's underwater caves. Because if people were in Mexico 30,000 years ago, then Naia and Chanhole 3 were not the first. They were the last survivors of something much older, a story we're only beginning to uncover. To understand just how deep this mystery goes, scientists looked closer, and what they found next completely changed the story, leading to a shocking twist no one saw coming. The shocking twist. When scientists started studying ancient DNA from caves across Mexico, they thought the results would confirm what Naia's tooth had already shown, that early Americans came from the same ancestors who crossed the Bering Land Bridge. But that's not what happened. The DNA results didn't fit the usual patterns. Along with markers from Beringia, scientists found genetic fragments that looked completely different. Some even seemed connected to people from Southeast Asia and the Oceania continent. It was as if these ancient humans had many different ancestors from all over the world. Even more shocking, some of the DNA was over 30,000 years old, much older than anyone had thought. If that was true, it meant people were here long before the Ice Age ended, carrying genes that later disappeared completely from history. At first, many scientists didn't believe it. Initially, they thought it was either contamination or a lab mistake. But test after test, from cave after cave, showed the same strange signals. The data was real, and it suggested something incredible, that humans might have reached the Americas in several waves, from different directions, long before the story we were taught ever began. For archaeologists, it changed everything. What if some groups came by land, while others traveled along coastlines now buried under the ocean? One researcher called it a terrifying truth, not because it was scary, but because it showed how much of our past is gone. These early people carried genetic stories that no longer exist in anyone alive today. This discovery split the scientific world. Some saw it as a breakthrough that could change everything we know about human migration. Meanwhile, others warned that such big claims needed much stronger proof. And so, a question that once seemed simple, who were the first Americans, became impossible to answer. The DNA told a different story. Those caves, silent for thousands of years, now hold one of humanity's greatest mysteries. In the end, the discovery didn't just change maps. It changed how we see ourselves. It showed how fragile our memory of the past is, and how easily entire civilizations can vanish, leaving behind only a few molecules in bone. The story of who the first Americans aren't over. It's still being written. And somewhere deep beneath Mexico's limestone caves, those forgotten ancestors are helping us shape our entire understanding of human civilization. Why it matters. The discoveries beneath Mexico's ground have completely changed what we know about who the first Americans were. For a long time, scientists believed a simple story, that one group of people crossed from Siberia into Alaska about 12,000 years ago, then moved south and became the ancestors of all indigenous peoples in the Americas. But the caves tell a very different story. Naia's DNA showed a deep connection between ancient Mexico and Beringia. Chanhole 3 showed that people back then were far more diverse than anyone expected. The discoveries from Chiquihuite Cave along with the unusual mix of DNA, have pushed back the timeline of humans in the Americas by tens of thousands of years. Together, these discoveries suggest that the first Americans weren't just one group, but many. A mix of lineages, some of which vanished long before recorded history. For indigenous communities, these discoveries confirm what their ancestors have always said, that their roots go deeper than any written history. Scientifically, this is a turning point. With new tools like advanced DNA sequencing, underwater archaeology, and precise dating methods, we can now look further back in time than ever before. But the more scientists discover, the more questions appear. How many times did humans migrate here? How far did they travel? And how many groups lived and vanished without leaving descendants? It's a strange mystery, and the deeper we search, the less certain we become. So here we are. From Naia to Chanhole 3, every discovery brings us closer to understanding what ancient human life was like, how people lived here, where they came from, and how they survived in a world so different from ours. Each new find adds another piece to the puzzle, showing that the story of the first Americans is far more complex than anyone ever imagined. But what do you think? Who were the first Americans, and how did they end up on this continent? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this video, ensure you give it a thumbs up. Also, consider subscribing if you haven't already, because we will be uploading more crazy stories like this one in the coming weeks. Until then, see ya!